Good afternoon, everyone. So, I was a young grad student almost 3 decades ago, and my supervisor turned to me just before I started my first global assignment and said, "Embrace the chaos." I really didn't understand what that meant at that time, but I knew as I embarked on my first 3 months of global work that it would actually change the trajectory of my life. So, from Central and South America to the Caribbean, I found myself leading different projects, from HIV/AIDS education to educational reform to post-disaster management, working with communities to re-envision and recreate what was possible for them. Every 3 to 36 months, our teams grew. We formed, we normed, we stormed, we performed, and then we adjourned. And everything I've learned about team development, everything I've learned about coaching happened during those years. So it's not that different from the recreation we're undertaking now as a human nation. And I really have learned how embracing chaos is something that we can all do to ripple out the effect of change. Because change doesn't happen just by ourselves. Change happens in collaboration with others. So I want to share with you a couple definitions to start our reflection today. Chaos, and Oxford Languages defines this as in behavior so unpredictable as to appear random, owing to great sensitivity to small changes in conditions. Many of you may be more familiar with the ripple effect, and the ripple effect really arcing out as time goes forward. It really is about the small change or small events that can lead to that unpredictable wave over time. So today, I want to springboard from my former global work to talk a little bit about what's possible for us. And in today's world, I spend my time now looking at coaching. How do we spark different conversations, not just one person at a time, but in groups and teams? And through my work in disaster management, realize that the really interesting part of change happens on the other side. And I think that's really where we are today, in a moment of being able to reimagine and recreate where we go to next. So, I want to share with us a little bit about coaching. Perhaps you've heard about this thing called coaching. It was when I was a young leader with the United Nations that I first heard about coaching. As a trainer, a facilitator, I knew we could really do some great things, but it was when coaching was added to the mix that the good became great. So coaching is about helping us move from A to B. And I'd like you to think about where you are today and maybe where you want to go tomorrow. What is a trajectory that's going to help you move from today to tomorrow? Coaching is also about taking action and deepening awareness. In today's world, it's really easy to take lots of action, but is it the right action? And in coaching conversations that take place around boardrooms and fireside, it's really about exploring what are our perspectives, what are our belief systems, how can this help us shift in a world of ongoing change? Finally, coaching is about accountability. It's about letting the rubber hit the road and looking at what's going to take us to move from A to B. Now, my area is really about teams. In all those years of working on post-disaster management, it was very clear that it wasn't one person affecting change. I really do believe that the days of the lone wolf are done, and that very much it's about activating the power of the collective. As we reimagine and recreate what's possible, we want to marry two things together. We want to look at who we are and how we are in relationship with each other, as well as what are we aiming for? What are our results? And in that nexus point, together, the who and the what becomes a place of excellence. So let's take a look. And in my work with teams, whether it's a team in post-disaster management, whether it's simply a team in downtown Toronto, we really want to put together our 6 ingredients. So I first really stumbled across this about a decade ago. I got a call from one of my clients, and it was the typical, Jen, we need you to come in. We have a team. Could you come and help them have better conversations? I said, sure, but what's really at play? And it was the usual. Well, they don't really know each other. And I said, well, there must be something more than just that. Well, you're the expert, Jen. Come on down and see us. So I really thought back to, well, what might be at play with this system? All I knew was that it was a situation where a product needed to get across the border. And that product was not going anywhere. Initially, it seemed to be very localized, but as the sponsor unfolded the conversation, it turned out that it was actually something that was impacting the entire eastern seaboard. So, got in my car, and as I was driving, they had made a request, could you bring and do this? I said, I think we need a little bit more. And what we do know is that even with all the change, the foundations of team excellence have remained the same. So it's nice, in times of complexity, that there can actually be some simple things that remain the same. And in our last few years, as we've moved through the heart of complexity, think about what still is the same. For you, my guess is there's still many core elements. So today, I want to share the 6 things that teams really need to thrive. And whether you're in an office or a family or in a community, these are all elements that we can use to really help us have better conversations, better collaboration, and better results. So I want to share those 6 elements with you. And it's not just what we do, but it's who we are. Because what we know is that the most diverse teams are the teams that excel. Diversity is a strength. And it's challenging for us to work across differences, but the teams that really do excel have found ways to leverage their styles, to really amplify their strengths, and to show up as who they are each and every day at work. So as we go through this, I'd like you to think about a team that you're on. Again, it could be your family. It could be the office you go to. It could be that Zoom room you're in every day. And we first know that teams that excel have clarity around their mission, their why. Why do we do what we do? And within that, there's usually a team member who's holding the banner of visionary. Think about your teams. There's probably someone who is looking out on the horizon line. We know in times of disruption and times of change, the one thing that might only remain the same is that horizon. Everything in the foreground can be moving, almost like whiplash, but our visionary is the one who keeps her eye or his eye on the prize. And I say her eye because on my team, we have a visionary. She is great at creating ideas. When it comes to execution, though, we know these ideas are just going to stay there. So in a team, the good news is we have other people. Our second ingredient we need are shared goals. What are we aiming for? And in an ever-changing environment, think about what we've been through in the last few years, that may always change. So what is our what? What do we need to do? How do we get from A to B? And what's going to help us shift? Within this is where we want to activate the power of the builder, that workhorse, the person on the team who's going to make things happen. They can take that vision and start to translate it into reality. As we look at possibilities, think about who in your system is the builder. They're not setting the line of sight, but they are looking at how do you build, how do you get from A to B. Teams are rarely 2 people. We have a few more that we're going to look at. Our third area is ensuring that we have some shared agreements, or what we call shared behavioral norms. What's interesting in this area is that really the theory is now catching up to the practice. And it was no surprise for me in 2015 when Google released a study. It was a study called Project Aristotle. They had looked at what made their project teams excel. And one of the main ingredients was this ability to have shared agreements, have those shared behavioral norms. Regardless of where we are, on Zoom or Teams, at home or back in the office, it's critical that we know who we are and how we operate, what is acceptable, and what takes us outside of those lines. And the ingredient is further supported by our culture wizard. Culture is something that's getting a lot of attention these days. It's how we do things here. It's what differentiates us, whether we're in a Zoom room or a Teams room or in a big area like this. How do we do things? And the culture wizard is an alchemist. They are the ones that are blending things together and helping us as a team articulate who we are. If you look around at today's event, think about the environment, think about the culture, think about the message. The culture wizard in a team is there to help us excel. So our fourth area, and that is shared team practices. When are we going to do this? One of the biggest challenges of the last few years was the fact that we couldn't be together, or we didn't spend time on a regular basis together. Teams need both informal time and formal time. It's the potluck as much as that formal team meeting. And so our innovative experimenter comes in handy here. And the innovative experimenter on a team is typically pushing the boundaries. They might have that research and development role. They might be the one who's seen as the innovator. But instead of meeting for an hour, they're going to say, hey, can we meet for 20 minutes instead? Can we meet 20 minutes this week and next week and the following week instead of these long, long meetings? So, number 4 ingredient, shared team practices. And then we want to make sure we have clear roles. There's a lot of conflict in teams these days as we reimagine what's possible. And a big part of this is looking at what are the roles we're holding. There's something known as role fatigue. And think about if this is something happening in your world. Role fatigue happens when we are asked to do the same thing day in and day out. And I see for some of you, this is something you know well. Burnout, currently such a big issue, often has its roots or a connection with this idea of role fatigue. So in your teams, in your systems, think about who is playing what role and what's needed to really activate the best in you. Our social convener is the one in the team who is really keeping an eye on this. And again, their vision, their style, their priorities are going to be different than those in other parts of the team. And finally, we have our final ingredient, the how. What are you committed to no matter what? Action is just as important as reflection as we move paradigms. And we want to lean into the power of the connector. The connector is a bridge between action and awareness, between reflection and catalyst. And our connector helps us activate that shared commitment. So as you think about those team systems you're a part of, whether it's your community, whether it's your family, whether it's an organization, ask yourself, what role do you play? And what role is needed? Are there any changes that need to be made? Those are our 6 factors, and they're really contingent on another essential ingredient that I want to leave you with, and that is the triad of trust, safety, and connection. Until we have those 3 elements in place, it's hard for us to bring our best self to work. So be thinking about what is allowing you as a group, as a team, to activate the trust, safety, and connection. As we think about what's possible, this is something we're going to keep revisiting. In fact, it relates to how we think. And there was some research done by Richard Boyatzis and his team. And what they've studied is what happens to the brain when we ask coaching questions. So when we ask questions like, what's possible? What happens in our brain? And what he's found is actually it opens up the brain. It maps to a part of our brain called the positive emotional attractor network. And the brain literally opens, allowing us to see more possibilities, allowing us to envision what might not yet be true. And as we continue to shift paradigms, as the world continues to change, as it no doubt will, our ability to really keep an open mind is absolutely essential. And as we go back and think about where we are and where we want to be, which is the heart of coaching, just remember, and this is what Haas and Mortensen said, that collaboration has become more complex. Our ability to work with others has become more complex, but it's always essential to remember that success takes us back to the fundamentals. So what I've shared with you today are the foundations of team effectiveness. We have seen this in the 90s with Kazenbach and Smith, in the 2000s with Hackman and Wagerman, and with Patrick Lencioni and his work. So the basics remain the same. And what we need now is to make sure that we're really injecting what we're doing with creativity and innovation. That's where the shift really happens. So I want to leave you with a final thought. Anything is possible. And we all have the potential to really create our own ripple effect. In a world of change and disruption, in a world of ongoing complexity, what's the ripple effect you want to create? Thank you.